for your practice. So we're back on the Eightfold Path. We kind of ran astray last week for what was it, potluck? Yeah, that's what happened.
Seems like a month ago.
It does. It seems like 1,000 years ago. That's why I was like, what did we do last week? It was a potluck. Oh, yeah. So the Eightfold Path, it's really one of the core teachings in this practice. If you really wanted to look at what the core teachings are, it's generally considered that the Four Noble Truths are the core teachings. And that's where we find that, in life that there is suffering, that there is a cause to that suffering, there's an end to that suffering, and there's a path that leads to the end of that suffering. And that's where we find ourselves today, is on this Eightfold Path. We've already covered the Panya part of the path, which is the right view and right intention. And so this brings us to the Sila part of the path. The Sila is a word that normally is translated as morality or ethics. I prefer integrity. I think that really just works better, integrity. Do we have integrity with our actions? Do we have integrity with our speech? Do we have integrity with what we do for a living? Does what we do for a living cause harm to ourselves or to others? As the Buddha would say, does it lead to my affliction or to the affliction of others? And so today we're going to talk about speech. And does our speech lead to our own affliction or to the affliction of others? And if you really put a magnifying glass on it, probably sometimes, right? Like, I know we all have the best intentions and we do the best we can, but speech is one of those things that we can kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, kind of fuck up a little bit sometimes, right? Like, I know I've definitely been unskillful in my speech at times in my life. A lot of times in my life. A lot. A whole shitload. Been unskillful with my speech, but that's okay, right? Like, I'm a human being and I'm doing the best I can. So we're going to talk about right speech. And so the Buddha laid out some ways that we really want to look at our speech. And if you look at the 5 precepts, you will find that speech is also a part of these precepts that we take as lay practitioners. As I said, there are 5 of them, and these 5 are to not cause any harm to any living thing, to not take what is not freely given, to be wise and careful with our speech, which means that we're not to commit any false, slanderous, or harsh speech, to be wise and careful with our sexual stuffs, and then to be free of any substances that lead to heedlessness. So what does our speech look like, right? Well, there's a particular set of parameters that we really want to look at. And when we're using any form of speech, we want to look at it. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it timely? Is it helpful? And is it necessary? And if it doesn't meet all those qualifications, probably not, don't say it, right? Like, lying can be particularly kind of iffy. Lies have a way of proliferating on their own. Once you tell one lie, then you have to start telling more lies to cover up the first lie, and it just turns into this big, like, Ouroboros of a snake eating its own tail, and these lies can just spin out of control. And lies, if we're really looking at lies, like, that's kind of like trying to control reality, right? Like, we're trying to shape reality to better suit us so that we generally don't get in trouble. I don't really see many other reasons to lie other than trying to avoid some sort of negative consequence, right? Generally, that's why people lie. Either that or to make themselves look like something that they're not. But even that can lead to trouble. I know when I was using drugs and doing heroin, I lied a lot. I was a master thespian. I could give you any story that you wanted to get what I wanted out of you. And I did. And my poor mother suffered tremendously over that. And I am very regretful of those times. And you have to start keeping track of your own lies. And that's hard. It gets harder and harder the more lies you tell. So these days I try to not do that. I do my best to be forthright with my speech and not tell lies, because it just seems to work out better that way. And there's a lot less regret when we don't lie. It doesn't really come up in my meditation. Oh, I feel so guilty over that lie that I told. If we just don't lie, we don't have to feel guilty. There's something to feel guilty over. Is it helpful? Oftentimes it might be true, right? If it's true, then why wouldn't you want to say it? Well, maybe it's not helpful. It can be perfectly factual. It can be absolutely true. But if it's not helpful in that moment, again, probably not a skillful thing to do. And that kind of covers timely as well, right? Like if it's not well placed, like certain things, there's a time and a place for them to say certain things, right? And it's not all the time, and it's not all the places. Another way that the Buddha said we should really look at our speech is like just idle chatter. The Buddha was kind of against just idle chatter, talking just for the sake of talking. I don't know if you noticed, but the Buddha, I'm pretty sure he meditated a lot, and so he wasn't really into like just random chit chat. Like if it wasn't important, like why say it? And I know we're all probably guilty of that to some extent, just talking for the sake of talking, making small talk. Oh, how's the weather? All the stuff like that. But I'm not a fan of the small talk so much these days. You ever met someone that just doesn't get that? That just talks to just hear their own voice? It's like they don't actually listen to anything that you have to say. It seems like they're just waiting for their turn to talk. I know several people like that. Dajum Rinpoche said that people who know how to keep their mouths shut are rare. And I'd be inclined to agree with that. Everybody wants to be heard, and say what you got to say, but make sure it falls under those parameters. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it timely? Is it helpful? Is it necessary? And when we're talking about speech, again, does it lead to the affliction of others, or does it lead to my own affliction? So it's not just how we talk to others, but how we talk to ourselves as well. I think that's like the biggest one, right? I know I personally, for the longest time, said some pretty horrible things to myself and about myself. I was my own worst critic, as I think we all are. And the things we say to ourselves, we would never say to another person. Almost. Unless they're your partner. Because unfortunately, we treat the people closest to us the way we treat ourselves. And why do we do that? Generally because there's more skin in the game, right? We actually care about that person, so we think that by being overly critical and overly harsh, they'll get the message that we would send to her, and that never works out. All it does is hurt feelings. That's all it does. So we need to be mindful of the way that not only we speak to others, but the way we speak to ourselves. And what avenues are we using for speech, right? Has anybody been on the internet lately? I don't know if you guys have noticed, but people are fucking awful on the internet, and they will say things online that they would never utter to your face. Never. So, when we're being mindful of our speech, not just our everyday speech, not just our in-person interactions, but how are we speaking to others via text messages? Are we being overly critical? Are we saying things that we wouldn't say in person? I think that's a pretty good litmus. If you wouldn't say it to somebody's face, probably don't say it over the internet either. It seems to be a pretty good way to approach things, I think. Again, we have to look at it, is it even necessary? I don't know how many times I've typed something out and been like, why am I even about to respond to this? Why am I putting in my 2 cents? What does it even matter? And it doesn't. Most of the time it doesn't. And by doing that, I would just open myself up for ridicule or criticism or something else that probably wouldn't feel very good, right? Most of the things we say, we probably don't even need to say, if we're being quite honest. Yeah, so speech is important. This is kind of a short talk, honestly. There's not a whole lot we can really say about it, but we should just watch our mouths. And not only the way, that we actually speak, but thoughts are related to this too, because all speech starts with a thought. So, everything starts with a thought. As the Buddha said in the Dhammapada, it's all mind-made. Everything is created from the mind. So before we speak, it's a thought. And before that, there's an intention. And before the intention, there's a motivation. So really, what are our motivations behind our speech? Why are we saying the things that we say? What's the purpose? Make sure that it matters. Make sure it's kind. Make sure it's at the right time. Because it can be true, and again, it can be true, and it can be kind, and it can be helpful, but it might just not be the right time to say these things. So right speech. Watch your mouths. It's best just for me, and this is just, I'm speaking for myself. I've learned to just shut the fuck up, quite honestly. I try to just not talk as much as possible. I'm pretty quiet most of the time, unless I'm up here. Anyway, we'll move into a longer meditation.